Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Bipolar Lines. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Laura, and if you're new here, welcome. This podcast is for spouses, partners, and loved ones that love someone with bipolar disorder.
And together, we have over 40 years of experience of being a partner to our spouses with bipolar 1 disorder.
We do. So today's episode is actually going to be addressing the unexpected controversy, at least unexpected for you and myself.
Correct.
That came from our last episode, season 2, episode 16, and we entitled A Magical Life.
Yeah, I'm pausing there because we intended for that episode to bring some lightness, some airiness, some reflection into the ears of our listeners because we talk about so many things that are really heavy and intense and emotional, right? So that is why we wanted to have that or to do that episode. And we had to be in the right frame of mind. Laura and myself did, in order to record that episode. But
Yes.
the result, Laura, that we found, the chitter chatter within the Facebook group and some DMs was people were having a hard time relating.
Yes. And we want to just talk about, I think, why that might have been, and also offer maybe some different angles that maybe we didn't before.
Yeah. So I think a few things are going on. So if you listen to that and you weren't able to relate, I want to clear up one potential misunderstanding, or maybe we weren't as clear as we needed to be. Our goal was not to tell you that you should lean into hypomanic episodes because they're all magical and wonderful and fun.
That was definitely not our goal, and I think it might have landed that way for some.
Yes, 0 out of 10. Do not recommend that. We were acknowledging a correlation between our spouses and when these magical moments exist are typically occurring during a hypomanic state. Also, number 2 for that, we would never encourage into existence for anyone's person to move into mania from hypomania and tell you it's magical. So just to clear up those two things, we just want to make sure that you understood what we were trying to convey. And that's a sticky situation. I think I said that before, that there have been people that have told me in the past, like, and they're very hesitant. They say it with some guilt, maybe some embarrassment, but they come to me and they're like, I don't know how to say this, but sometimes hypomania is fun, right? That's the angle we were talking about.
Yes.
They're not going to say those things to me, obviously, if their person's hypomanic episode results in chaos and destruction and disaster.
Right.
We are specifically talking about those very unique presentations of hypomania.
Yes. Exactly. And I did want to mention, I think that there's some terminology too that we should go over. There, in any episode with bipolar, at least from my understanding, there are terms that go with it called euphoric or dysphoric.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so when I somewhat joke, but not really, when I say Cody lives on the more euphoric, hypomanic side of life, he does. And so that is probably why I have more magical moments. Do I want that to shift into mania? Hell no. God, no. God, no. And that torches my whole life and his. But when you're euphoric, I think someone had even sent that to us, or you, with a question mark. Euphoric is really, I just looked it up on Google, but it says euphoric hypomania, the high. This is the classic presentation where the quote unquote revved up energy feels positive, at least initially. And that is a very important caveat, at least initially.
Yes.
And so that's when we're saying we can get these magical moments. There is also dysphoric hypomania. They title it the agitated high, also known as a mixed episode or mixed features. This is a paradoxical state where the high energy of hypomania is fueled by the dark mood of depression. And I would say Jeremy gets this, according to this podcast and me listening to you, quite a bit.
Yes.
1000%.
Yeah, good call on bringing those terms up.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're not having magical moments when Jeremy's in a dysphoric hypomania. That's not happening. No.
Negative, ghostwriter. Negative.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us to point out that, like, The reason we are with our people is we have these magical moments, and they're fantastic and they're great and they're wonderful for not just us, but our children too. But there's the other side of the reason we're staying with our people. And we've mentioned this before, but we're going to mention it again, and we're going to keep mentioning it because it has to be said. We both, Laura and I both, have deal breakers and boundaries in place for a reason. And one specifically is our husbands, in this case, have to be in treatment and adhering to their medication, period.
Yes. Like Brooke might have nuanced deal breakers related to alcohol that I don't have. There might be, it's dependent on your relationship and the situation. And the boundaries are in place to keep everyone's sanity and to keep you safe, ultimately, always. And when I see comments like, well, my person was diagnosed bipolar, but they don't accept the diagnosis and do whatever they want. And I'm, tiptoeing and doing this and that, and nothing's working. It's not going to work, my friends. You are fighting a losing battle if you are attempting to control or a situation in which an unmedicated bipolar person is sick and not accepting their diagnosis, you will lose because the illness will always win.
And why is that? Let's be very clear. Maybe this will hit a little differently. You are trying to outrun a mental illness that does not exist in a time and space of logic and reason. It does not matter how you try to win. It cannot understand except your logic and reasoning. The result is another shift. What I'm getting at is, like, for example, my person is sick and I've tried to stay calm and patient, and my person says, "You're controlling my life." So I decide to no longer be and say things that are received as controlling. Well, now my person believes that I don't love them anymore. I don't care about them anymore. So now I can't do that. And I've tried two different things. And now I'm going to go to a third thing. And we are telling you that third thing, it will also not work. That is what we're saying. The illness will win because there's no logic behind, there's no cognitive thinking. There's no association of how your person feels about you genuinely, because they're not able to be themselves in those moments. You're talking to the illness.
Yeah, you're having a conversation with the illness. That's what's happening. And you're trying to appease the illness, and you will never appease the illness because, as Brooke said, and maybe it'll hit a different way when I say it too, so, take what resonates. But you are attempting to have a logical conversation with someone who is at the current mood state, if they're not medicated and treated, likely not able to engage in a logical conversation because you're not talking to your person, you are talking to the illness. I was just talking to someone the other day and he was like, "What is the biggest misconception you wish you could clear up about bipolar disorder?" And I was like, "Well, that's not a heavy question or anything because there's
That's
a
not
lot."
loaded.
But I guess what I told him, because what came to mind at the time was it's the fact that bipolar is cyclical. And when you get glimpses, even of lucidity, and you see your person there, people, not just spouses, partners, but the outside world believes that, like, see, they're not really sick. They're just making this up. Or like they're in control. They really have control. Look, I just had a logical conversation with them. They're there. I think that's what the hardest thing is about bipolar is because if they do get treated, like Cody's completely logical. I just had a wonderful conversation with him last night talking about this controversy where he said, I would like to one day come on the podcast and tell people that I have to be trying and committed to treatment, or obviously you couldn't stay with me. That's literally what he said.
Yep. And that's
And it took
super
a while to
important.
get there. It took a while to get there. I don't know if he was there his first episode, second
Probably not.
episode, third episode. Like it took a while, but he recognizes that now. And it's because I had to use boundaries. So I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah. I mean, like, four different thoughts hit my head at the same time, and now I don't know which one I want to grab. I'm a firm believer that the illness, whether that's mania or depression, I firmly believe, I will die on this hill, that the illness has a goal. Okay.
yes, you've said this before.
So that goal exists, and it will do whatever it takes to get and meet that goal. meaning it will take you down proverbially, right? Like while trying to achieve said goal. So if you're trying to help your person and your person doesn't want the help, there's a reason for that. The illness has a goal. It doesn't want the help because getting the help would not allow the illness to reach the goal. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, as you're speaking, it just reminds me maybe a more concrete analogy for people because that might seem somewhat abstract is that substance abuse disorder is also a mental illness and it frequently accompanies bipolar. Like the
Yep.
prevalence is high for both.
Yep.
And I think people understand substance abuse disorder better because they understand the end goal is the substance. So their end goal is the substance. And what does it cause people to do? Not be able to reason, not be able to be logical, do and say really shitty things to people that
Lie,
they love, lie. Yes.
cheat,
Yeah.
steal, hurt
Yes.
others. Yep.
So that might be a more concrete example to compare it to where we understand the goal is the substance. With mania, it could be anything. Literally, you don't know because you're not in your person's brain and they might not even know. But guess what? The goal isn't to have a logical conversation with you. That's definitely not the goal.
And especially if there's paranoia involved. If
Mhm.
there's you're never going to find out the goal because the illness is presenting with paranoia and it doesn't trust the surroundings. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
safe. So it's always going to be moving and changing and what you are seeing is just pure chaos. So I don't for me, I tend to look at the patterns and I'm able to identify the goal, right? Most of the time. But that doesn't matter if you're engaging with your person from a different what's the word? From a different with a different goal in mind. Like you are attempting to have a conversation with your person because you want to move the ball forward in a direction that's logical and rational. But the person you're trying to talk to does not have that same goal, right? So like you're not going to be able to move the ball forward.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I feel like we have to go back to that because it's really important. But the other part of this, and also this is no judgment against or towards the individuals that couldn't relate to our episode. We understand that not everybody is going to understand or relate to our content. That's okay. We don't have any issues with that. We shouldn't have any issues with that. If so, we shouldn't have a podcast. So we're bringing this up because there are things that it makes us think about. And by doing this and bringing up these situations, we're reminded that like you have to want more for yourself in order to put those boundaries in place to maybe get to the point that's a better life for you. You get to define what a better life is. We aren't defining that for you. We will never define that for you. What's discouraging for us at times is to see people in the same cycle of telling us, yeah, thank you so much for this information. This is really helpful. It registered. But then when something happens, not implementing the information we're providing them, not choosing themselves and wanting change for themselves and for the person, right? Like the duality exists. So that's a tough for me. That's a tough conversation to have because I don't want our listeners to feel judged. I'm not judging you. I'm not judging you. We just recognize the pattern. And I think we have to point it out.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many other things, but I'm just going to piggyback
Yeah,
off of
do it.
that. For one, sometimes it feels like the loving thing to do is to stay and accept and accept and accept. And it's not the loving thing to do, not for your person and not for yourself. Because for one, it's hurting you. It's actively hurting you to try and pour from an empty cup that isn't being received anyways. It's just going into an ocean abyss. It's not pouring into your person's cup. And so it's leaving you depleted. But then two, it's also not helping your person because as I've said before, from the mouth of another person that follows me who has bipolar disorder, they said, we need boundaries when we are in an episode because we are in a boundless situation. They themselves cannot get themselves out of this situation. Like you are actually helping them by implementing
Yeah.
boundaries.
Yep.
And that is the loving thing to do. And that is the weird thing about loving someone with a mental illness because it feels like you do opposite of what your inclination would be if they were sick with anything else.
Yep.
And the other thing
Truly.
is if you are sitting there and you truly can't remember any good times, or you, even if you didn't have a magical moment, like, Brooke and I were talking about, like if you are struggling to see any good times or remember, or maybe you didn't even have them. I honestly don't know. I was trying to get clarification from some people in the group. Then maybe if I were you, I would question my relationship, not just the bipolar, because Cody is my absolute best friend. I mean, even if it's not magical, I was making Brooke laugh last night because I had to walk the damn wiener dog. But it's just moments like that where he wanted to take a walk with me and it made me happy. I was like, really? Like, because I'm doing this challenge with our wiener dog and he's not necessarily a part of it, but I love it when he comes. Like, there's all those little moments when he made me coffee and brought it upstairs before I woke up this morning and it's on my nightstand. When he does thoughtful gestures for me or the kids, like he just made Ashlyn this weird Taylor Swift octopus fidget that is so creepy, but she loves it. All of those little moments, they might
Mhm.
not be magical. All the little moments are why I love him over and over and over again. We
Yep.
experience those little moments. Wouldn't
Yep.
you say the same thing about you?
Absolutely. It's those moments where you can connect with your person outside of the illness. And I hate to use the word normal, but it's a normal relationship
Yeah.
situation where you can trust your person, rely on your person, depend on your person, feel love from your person, feel safe, secure, wanted, needed, whatever you need. You're getting it from your person at some point, right? And it doesn't have to last forever. It's not going to if they have bipolar disorder. I get that, but, like, if you're not connecting with your person at all and you are staying on the roller coaster, that is problematic. Listen to our words. That is problematic. It's not sustainable. And it's time to look within yourself and at the relationship to figure out if that's true or not. Because look, we get it. Like we said this in our magical life episode. Like we had to be in the right headspace to do that episode. And we are saying that out loud. Not a lot of people would say that. When
Yeah.
you're pissed, when you're hurt, and somebody says to you, yeah, but think of all the good times. Tell me how you respond.
Yeah, that wouldn't hit well.
No.
And so
So,
we get it. We're here to say we get it. And we understand why, if it didn't hit or it didn't resonate. We truly do understand why without any judgment.
yeah, we totally get it. We know that's not going to be received well from everybody. We're just asking you to take that next step. We're not asking, we're encouraging you to take that next step to do a little bit of a deeper dive. Okay. Because the one thing I don't want this podcast to do, and I've seen some chatter about it on Reddit, which is like people are having a rough time, couples are having a rough time, parent, child having a rough time. And there are individuals that are encouraging them to come to our podcast and listen to it. And they're like, if you want to consider reconciliation or understand how to stay with your person, like go listen to our podcast. Okay, cool. That's great. We appreciate the referrals. But Laura and I are not here to tell you you have to stay in this relationship with your person just because they have bipolar disorder. Like, no, we're not asking you to stay. Actually, we're not asking you to do anything. We're not telling you to stay, and we're not going to judge you if you don't stay.
Bingo. Because that's the thing, is that you are not looking at two superhuman women who tolerate everything under the sun for the sake of loving our man until we die because we made a vow. Like, guys, that's not reality.
No,
That's not how we have managed to do this. We have done it through looking at ourselves, looking at the relationship, looking at these hard conversations, looking at the hard thing to do. I mean, the easy thing, when I had to leave Cody for the first time and go move back in with my parents, I told my mom the easy thing to have done was to stay, because it was. Because the mental load it took and the fighting and the everything when I left, and implementing the boundaries and then knowing that by implementing a boundary, I had to accept, I had no expectation of the outcome. What I wanted was for Cody to get better. And, my boundary was you have to stay in treatment. You have to be doing this
Mhm.
yourself. You have to be on medication. You have to be seeing a therapist. And I had to accept that he might not do that. And I was still madly in love with him. That was 9 months after we were married. It was literally heartbreaking. I collapsed in my mom's arms, and I'm not a person that cries a lot. Like, it was one of the hardest things to do. And that's what I told my mom. The hard thing to do is this. It would have been so much easier just to stay and just hope it gets better. But it's same with you. Like, that's
Yep.
not how it worked with you either.
No. No, no, no. Not at all. I know there are some individuals out there that are having a hard time and aren't able to relate to that magical life episode. And just know that we aren't judging you. We're not asking you to stay for the sake of staying because your person has a diagnosis. That's not it. In fact, we would encourage you to do the opposite. That's why we're here. That's why we have this podcast, is to help spread education, awareness, and understanding. Because another hill I'll die on is that without treatment and medication for the person that has the diagnosis, they have to want it and create a level of importance of managing their illness, right? More than you. And they have to do it. And if they don't, that relationship is not sustainable. And in fact, I believe that is where the line gets crossed on into this is toxic. You're just creating more trauma for yourself or for your children or for your family. In my opinion, that is where those lines are crossed, and that is toxic. 1000%.
Yeah, it is. Can I just divert it just a slight bit? A lot of people too keep talking about how their partner discarded them. And they're using terminology that is it's very much part of the narcissistic personality disorder. When we talk about discard, will you explain the difference? Because you did it very nicely in the Facebook group. I want people to hear this.
Yeah, and I'm going to grab my notes here because I feel like it's very intentional to separate this in a way that people can understand and listen. But okay, so discard implies that there is a pattern of devaluation and intentional emotional detachment. That intentional emotional detachment and devaluation is personality driven. It's not mood related. There's intent behind it.
Yes.
Okay. That is the difference. Someone in a bipolar episode, as we've talked about, their brain is hijacked. They do not have the ability to access the parts of the brain that are required to to is the best way I know how to say it. Like I could get more into the brain functions, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala. I could get into that, but that doesn't matter. What you need to understand, dear listeners, is that by perpetuating this narrative that your bipolar person has discarded you, you're actually increasing the stigma of bipolar disorder, because discard and narcissist go hand in hand. So all of a sudden we have bipolar disorder that's now paired with narcissism, and it absolutely is not.
It is
It's not,
not.
which is why we are very quick to pounce on that. Okay, that's intentional. We don't want to encourage spouses, partners, and loved ones to use language tied to NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, when they're referring to the person that has bipolar disorder. Two very different things. And also, if maybe you're doing that because it feels validating. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you, the person, have felt discarded because that word feels validating to you, find a new word, please.
Yeah, please. Please,
Find a new
because
word.
Brooke, you're absolutely right that I feel like it perpetuates even more stigma related to bipolar disorder, especially since I'm actually quite pleased to see that individuals under narcissistic abuse are getting help, and there's getting that awareness out there that allows victims of narcissistic abuse to heal. But I don't want to see it at the expense of now we're lumping someone with a mental illness in with a personality disorder. And when someone with a mental illness in an active state, whether it be depression or mania, cannot show up for you because they can barely show up for themselves, even in mania, that we are now saying that we've been discarded. That's not what is happening. There are two, you might feel that way, you might feel discarded, but you have not been discarded in the same way a narcissist does.
Yeah.
I like to watch narcissistic TikTok. And if you're interested to know why that is, you should join the Line Holders Club because I'm not going
Yeah,
to
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about it on the
Yeah.
main feed. I've become familiar with certain terminologies, and that is very much part of it. It's like this period of love bombing followed by this period of discard and then devaluement, and then you go back to throwing a bone and you get this love bomb and then you get this discard, and it's like this cycle that is caused by the personality disorder. And so, like I said, I'm glad that there's that awareness out there so that victims can identify that, but we want to be so careful we're not using that terminology when we're talking about a mental illness like bipolar disorder.
Yes,
Because
1000%.
like you said, it implies intent.
It
With
implies
personality
intent.
disorders, there is intent. With mental illness, dude, they're just trying to survive. Their brain is offline.
Yes. Yes, yes. And even with someone that has borderline personality disorder, my husband has borderline personality disorder. And there has never been a point in time after I was educated about both bipolar and borderline that I would ever tell you all that he discarded me. No, because yes, borderline is a personality disorder, 1000%. How do I even say this? I don't want to get into the depths of borderline. But the the reason for someone feeling that way, using the term discard, which is misusing the term discard, but the reason is because the person with borderline goes into fight or flight mode because they've been triggered. The same thing happens for somebody who is in an episode that has bipolar disorder. The reason the person is leaving the relationship or leaving you, however you want to view it, is because they are in flight mode. You've heard of fight or flight, right? Your person is choosing flight. That's what that is. They cannot handle the emotional depth of what's happening and they are emotionally flooded. Their body is telling them to protect themselves. Again, bipolar disorder, they're not able to use their cognitive skills to think, 5 steps down the road about what will happen if I leave. That's not happening. They are choosing to survive the moment and whatever is going on. Their brain, their sick brain has said the best way to survive this moment is by you leaving. And also, I'm going to make this person feel like absolute dog shit on my way out so that they don't follow me.
Yeah. Bingo. So, yeah, I hope that clears up some misconceptions from that episode and just addresses some other items that we've been seeing that we wanted to address.
Yeah. Yep. And again, we're not judging you. We're not, we want everybody to be happy. We've said this numerous times. Everybody deserves love. Everybody deserves joy. Everybody deserves happiness. But when we see these things come up over and over and over and over again, like there's only so much we can do in the comment section or help you when we recognize that you aren't helping yourself. That's hard to say because we want people to listen to our podcast. That's not going to sit well with people. I understand that. But I wouldn't be helping you if I didn't say it.
Yeah. I mean, Brooke, you're very good at hard conversations.
Oh, well, I try. I have a big
And that's
heart.
one of them. That's one of them. Like even looking at yourself and having that hard conversation or that's hard. Like I said, like the easy thing to do a lot of times is to do nothing and just stay stuck. And you're just I don't want to see anyone hurt either. I want to see everybody happy. And um and just to reiterate that my happy moments, much less my magical moments with Cody, would not have been possible had I not implemented and he agreed to the boundaries that I
Yeah.
implemented. and that he agreed to them. Had either one of those things not happened, I would not be in this position.
No, because it's not sustainable.
Right, it's not sustainable, and that's one thing that
I wish
we
there
say
was
a lot.
history
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
stats for me to show you all. I
Yeah,
mean,
me too.
we can see it.
Yeah.
We talk to a lot of people. We can see it, but that is the reality. And by staying, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting a person. So yeah, um, we just want to go back to what we've said numerous times that, like, you have to show up for yourselves. You can't just show up for your person and love them through it.
Mhm.
It's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's very important. The other thing that I said last time too, that we wanted to mention, Brooke, is that I always tell people when they ask me, how did you get through this? How do you make it through this? I always say to get a therapist. Like I always have a therapist help me through that. Brooke, you wanted to clarify something that might have been a misconception with someone hearing that message in a
Yes.
previous podcast.
In a previous podcast episode, I had encouraged listeners if they felt how I did, which was I had told my therapist, like, a deal breaker for me is you telling me to leave my husband. Okay. That's not what my goal is. I want therapy to be about myself and learning the skills and tools to grow and handle, intense situations and trauma. And I told people, I encouraged people to do the same. Like, if that's your goal, then tell your therapist. Do not talk to me about leaving my husband. The confusion that I want to clarify is this: if you haven't provided your therapist with context about what that actually means, your therapist may not feel comfortable encouraging you and pointing out to you when you're walking on eggshells, when you should be implementing boundaries and skills so that the relationship with your person can continue. Okay. If
Exactly.
I feel like that could also be happening, and that's on me for not clarifying that. So if you have a therapist and they're not helping you understand the totality of what's happening and encouraging you to protect yourself through boundaries and talking about walking on eggshells, giving you resources and tools, had that conversation. And or maybe they don't know enough about bipolar disorder. Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Good
And
call.
I think those are two things to consider in the therapy process because when I ask people, are you in therapy? And they say yes, my thought is like, why is this therapist not recommending you do what my therapist did at the time, which was read Walking on Eggshells? That was like one of the first books I was recommended. Learn how to implement boundaries. This was extremely confusing to me for some reason. It's not now, but definitely was at the time. Resources for books on that. Like I was given so many resources. So when I'm like, what is their therapist doing? I guess that's what becomes my question. So
Right.
we just wanted to throw that out there that maybe those two things could have be happening.
Yeah. Yep. And if you're misusing terminology in therapy, that matters,
That does matter. That is a very good point.
because now your therapist has a new scope of understanding. At least they think they do.
Mhm.
And the advice that they're going to give you is not going to help you.
Yeah, because if you are using NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, if you're using NPD terminology like discard, and we just explained to you the difference between discard and your person not showing up for you in the same way, or you feeling some sort of way about it, those are two very different things going on from two
Yes.
very different etiologies. And so, of course, then the advice to you, or the feedback, or the validation, or whatever they're giving you is going to be different.
Yes. They would encourage you to tell your person how you feel. You cannot do that if they have bipolar disorder, right? So, like, it is so important. Please, people, understand, use a different term. Don't use discard. Don't use my person is such a narcissist. I mean, use whatever you want to use, but hear us. And that, I promise you, in the end, it's not helpful. It's not trendy. It's not fun. It's not glorifying anything. You're hurting yourself in the process.
Yeah, agreed, which is another reason I'm glad we have this podcast and just spreading awareness because I'm very like I said, I'm very glad that MPD is getting the light shown on it that it needs, but we definitely want to be very careful we're not
Blurring the
waiting and
lines.
blurring the lines. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, that is all for this episode. As always, thank you all so much for showing up for your person, for showing up for yourself.
So to our OG listeners and new, if our show speaks to you, please be sure to like, subscribe, or follow us on your favorite platform. You can also join our Facebook group, BipolarLines Pod, and we do hear you and we do listen to you, and we do want to take that feedback in that group and make them into episodes to help you. It is a private group. It's a safe space with the option to even post anonymously.
Yes. And if you want to hear more from us, you can join our Spotify membership. You'll get 2 bonus episodes a month, and no worries, our main feed episodes will continue to be free. So we go into depth in the Landholders Club, and we give a lot more information that we don't share on the main feed anymore. We're really enjoying creating those episodes, and we can't wait to see where the rest of that goes in the future.
You can also find us on TikTok. I'm the BP spouse, and Brooke is break_the stigma.
All right. We will see you next time.
See you next time.